Welcome to BAS 120. My name's Mr. Rankin. This is Chapter 1. We've broken it into two parts, Part 1 of 2. Today we're going to talk about what is business analytics. So let's walk through some of the learning objectives. Today we're going to try to learn how to define what business analytics is, why it's important, understand its applications, talk about some of the different scopes of business analytics, and then talk about the evolution of analytics. So let's talk about a short introduction. What's driving a lot of this is simply a tsunami of data that we've all seen. Data, by some estimates, is doubling every year. Some other interesting facts, some folks, 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 3 to 4 years. It's been facilitated by tremendous tools. We have lots more, I'll show you in a minute, lots more capabilities, storage capabilities, cost of CPU time's gone way, way down. I think we're all familiar with, we have much more powerful PCs and computers and smaller devices, and there's a lot more software tools and software capability to help us analyze all this tsunami of data. But it's getting more and more complex because it's not just the tsunami of data, but it's the real-time nature of data. It's the fact that it's now unstructured data. Lots of it's coming from Twitter accounts. Long gone are the days where all of our data was stored in the corporate vaults and the corporate databases. So it's much more complex data, and the speed of the data and the requirement for real time. We'll show you an example of a credit card a little bit later in this presentation. When I swipe my credit card, they don't have 3 days to evaluate that transaction. They have seconds to evaluate that transaction. It's also, because it's more complex, there's a large shortage of talent to actually look at all this data, analyze this data, and turn it into useful information to make business decisions. And that's basically the definition of business analytics. How do we use data, in all forms of data, to improve our business decisions? Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart, but just talk a little bit about the history of some of the facilitators that are working in our favor, so I would say, at least have a fighting chance against all of this inundation of data. Our storage costs have gone way down. Our network access has gone way up. CPU costs have come down. Bandwidth costs have come way, way down. I mean, if you remember, it wasn't long ago you were on a T-line trying to get data from one place to another. It wasn't long ago when 90% of the data over telephone lines was voice data. Well, that's changed dramatically. Because of the infancy and the changing, the landscape is enormous on big data landscape and analyzing it. You've got analytics, you've got visualization, you've got database structures, you've got all sorts of players. So it's a very complex environment, which makes it very exciting too. So let's get into a little more of the formal definition per the book. Business analytics is defined as the use of data, and data takes several forms, as we mentioned: information technology, statistical analysis, quantitative methods, mathematical computer-based models, to aid business managers to make insights about their business and operations. And we hope these insights lead to better decisions, which lead to a more successfully run business. So let's talk about why it's important, if we haven't already explained it. Well, a lot of data shows a strong relationship between business analytics and business performance, and I'm going to share some of those with you in a few minutes. If you understand the data supports better business decisions, in the fast pace of change, information is becoming more and more vital for businesses to remain competitive. Just to give you a quick example of the accelerated pace of change, which I think we all see in our daily lives, TomToms, GPSs on the top of our cars is going by the wayside because they're all getting built in. We've seen flurry of companies that were, the Enrons, WorldCom, all these guys have come and gone. So they did a survey in Business Week, Research Services. It's an interesting question. They surveyed executives. 83% of executives agreed that the importance of using information or data efficiently, right? Not just use it, not just crank out reports, but to use it effectively to run their business has never been greater. Now, there's some key words in here in my mind. Effectively, you got to use it effectively, but this is another key word to me. Has never been greater. These executives didn't say it was important. They said it's never been more important. So that's just an interesting note. CEO of Google, we talk about the amount of data and the tsunami of data. Well, he put it in other terms. Every 2 days now we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until the year 2003. So what used to take us 8,000 years to develop in data, we now create in every 2 days. That puts it in a very interesting perspective. We talked about the financial returns of business analytics. Another nuclear research study indicated that for every dollar a business spends on business analytics, they get a rate of return of $10.66. And we talked about, just to give you an SAP report, we talked about the influence of data, not just the tsunami, but the way data is changing, the unstructured data. The folks are still trying to understand what to do with. Now, it's interesting, you see now with terrorism and the Boston marathon stuff, how they utilize tweets and all this other stuff to try to predict some of this stuff. Or they used it a lot in the presidential elections. We're going to have a speaker on that later in the course. But the number of tweets per month now exceeds the population on the planet. So if you're not tweeting, it's you're pulling down the average. We talked about this briefly, that these improvements have been facilitated by the tools and the capacity and all that stuff. Lots of applications, because every business uses data. Every function of every business uses data. So the management of customers, you've seen that with probably Netflix or Amazon. People that liked this movie or this book, now we recommend this one. You've probably seen it with financial and marketing activities, supply chains, human resources, pricing, the gaming industry. We're going to go through a lot of these. Typical example right here. 10 years ago, our keychains had keys on them. They didn't have all these reward cards. The average person has 14 reward cards on their keychains. Over half the people in the United States use them at least every day. Now, do all these folks just love me so much they want to give me a discount? No, they're basically purchasing my information, purchasing my data, so that when they send me a discount, it's personalized. It's personalized to my buying needs. They understand me as a customer, how much I spend on me, how profitable a customer I am. They understand what my purchasing habits are. All of this is very, very important. More examples we talked about in marketing. We talked about Netflix. We talked about Amazon. We talked about all the keychains. Verizon used it. One of the biggest issues with cell phones early on was, people would change cell phone plans every time their 2-year commitment was up. Well, the cell phone industry, and Verizon was a leader, did a lot of analytical work to understand that if they gave us a new phone or a discount on a new phone, that would dramatically improve, basically it doubled the retention or the stickiness to their reward plans. Fraud, we talked about a credit card. When you swipe a credit card nowadays, if you've gone to the gas pump, for example, you do a credit card, they want to know your zip code right there, because they want to know whether that transaction should go through or shouldn't go through. In the insurance industry, cars, a lot of fraud, staged accidents, this stuff. Entertainment industry, Harrod's Casinos is one of the leaders in this. You know, there's a thing called the pain threshold. When am I going to walk away from the gambling machine, the slot machine? If I lose 10 times in a row, do I walk away, or do I walk away after 5 times? And in real time, do I need somebody to go down there and give me some discounts? Do I need somebody to offer me a discount on dinner tonight? Something so I stay. Sporting industry, in terms of pricing of tickets, StubHub has changed the way tickets are purchased. There's a thing called dynamic pricing, which now takes place. You know, if so-and-so's the all-star pitcher's coming to town, the price of those tickets are going to change. That didn't used to be the case. So we talked about the applications. It's all over the place. Marketing, fraud, healthcare is another big one. Finance. Now let's talk about the different scope of analytics. Now this is a very famous chart. It's based on Competing on Analytics, which was one of the really first dynamic books in this area by Thomas Davenport. And you're going to get to read the Harvard Business Review summary of this book as one of our cases or one of our discussion points. But this basic chart is used by a lot of folks in industry to say the degree of complexity and the degree of competitive advantage. Now, as we go up and get more and more complex with our analytics, so the first level is what's called descriptive analytics, or what's sometimes called business intelligence. That's where you're doing standard reporting, you're doing ad hoc reporting. You're basically describing what's happening today. You're describing the data. This is what the data looks like. The average on the test was an 80. That's interesting, it's good, but if you go up the ladder to what's called predictive analytics, well, can I use historical data to build a model to predict the future? Can I forecast next year's sales? Can I do some simulation models? Can I predictive model? Can I say my warranty costs next year are going to be down 20% because my quality's improved, and I know that my warranty costs are a function of my quality level? Can I make those assumptions? Predictive analytics is how do I take historical information, build a model to be able to forecast the future, and that helps me. How do I know the buying patterns? How do I know when to put discounts on, etc., based on historical data? Now, prescriptive analytics is where we use to optimization. We come up with an optimization equation. So, for example, how do I best route my buses in a city? Dublin, Ireland, we'll talk a little bit about their case where they saved thousands of dollars. And this is where the model or the computer actually takes all the alternatives based on certain constraints and based on what you're trying to optimize. It'll actually give you and provide you a solution. So these last two are often called advanced analytics. This is descriptive analytics is often called business intelligence. So some folks would call this descriptive analytics business intelligence, and they would combine predictive and prescriptive analytics and call it advanced analytics. Because the industry is so new, oftentimes people have a little bit different terms. That's why I'm giving you both sets of terms. So there's the scope. Descriptives where we use data to understand the past. We're just describing it. Predictive is where we analyze past history to predict what's going to happen in the future. And prescriptive is where we actually use optimization techniques. There it is again. Example of descriptive is the class average was an 81. Example of predictive is I know who to make the sales calls to because of past history. And prescriptive is where I actually optimize and use a mathematical model. So what route or frequency should a bank go to collect from their different ATM machines? Should they route to certain ones more often than other ones? Let the computer explain. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution. Finish this off with a little bit about the evolution. First, we had the history. You see the history of all and this is up here primarily so that you understand how much acceleration has taken place. Business analytics really started in World War II with what's called operations research, where they began to have computers around, the early advent of computers, which facilitated the ability to actually analyze large amounts of data. Well, then we started getting processors and personal computers came along. And then, of course, in 1992, the internet came along and everything started exploding. We had, today we got 88 billion Google searches every month. We talked about the number of text messages, the advent of unstructured data. So a lot has evolved and changed. Finally, let's talk about the evolution where we're at today. Business analytics is still a very emerging stage. You'll read this SAS report as one of your assignments. Currently, 97% of all companies use business analytics, large companies, but it's mainly for reporting and spreadsheets. So they're basically at the still at the business intelligence level. Very few are utilizing it to predictive analytics or prescriptive analytics. Institutions still drive most decisions with intuition, and there's a very cautious adaptation because folks still want to understand and see how it's going to improve their bottom line or their business results. Most businesses are not interested in just being fed the data. They want to know, what actions can I take with this data? Some of the roadblocks to adaptation is the data itself, the accuracy, the consistency, access to it, and as we talked about, the pure volume. We also talked about the lack of analytic talent. And lastly, there's a role that culture plays in there. There's still a lot of culture that wants to manage via intuition. So that's the end of part one. Part two, we'll talk about the different types of data. Any questions, send me an email, and there will be several example videos also in the playlist. Thanks.